The words on the foreclosure notice were burned into my mind. Final, it said. 30 days. 30 days until the home my husband, Robert, and I had built with our own two hands was no longer ours. I clutched the thin strap of my purse, the worn leather cool against my knuckles, and stared up at the name carved into the glass and steel tower that touched the clouds. Williams. It was a cruel joke from the universe, a name I had spent a lifetime trying to forget, now the only place that might save me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of old bones. Taking a deep breath that did nothing to calm me, I pushed open the heavy glass door. The air inside was different, smelling of money and something clean and floral. A young woman with skin as white as milk and hair the color of a new penny looked up from a polished desk. Her name tag said Siobhan O'Malley, manager. Her eyes, a startling green, took me in from my sensible, worn shoes to the gray streaks in my tightly coiled hair. I saw a flicker of surprise, maybe pity. I was 68 years old, applying for a job that girls a third of my age burned out on. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice softer than I expected. "I'm here about the waitress position," I said, my own voice sounding thin and reedy. I handed her my application, the paper slightly wrinkled from my nervous grip. She took it, her manicured nails a bright spot of color against the plain white page. She scanned it, her brow furrowing slightly. "Beatrice Williams," she read aloud, and the sound of my full name in this building felt like a stone dropping into a deep, still well. "It says here you haven't worked in quite a while." I swallowed hard. "I've spent my life in service, ma'am, raising a family, taking care of a sick husband. I know how to work hard. I know how to look after people." My hand instinctively went to my pocket, my fingers closing around the small, smooth stone I'd carried for years. Robert gave it to me on our first date, a simple gray rock from the riverbank. It was my anchor. Siobhan looked at me, really looked at me, for a long moment. I expected her to give me a polite dismissal, to tell me they were looking for someone with more current experience, but instead, she nodded slowly. "Tell me, Beatrice," she said, leaning forward. "This is a demanding job. The hours are long, the customers can be difficult. Why here? Why now?" The truth was a raw, aching thing in my throat. "I'm about to lose my home," I said, the words coming out in a whisper. "I have nowhere else to go. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm a quick learner, and I won't let you down." There it was, my whole life, my desperation, laid bare on a polished wooden desk. I felt a flush of shame, but I met her gaze. Let her see it all. Let her see the fight I still had left in me. She looked from my eyes down to the application, then back up again. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "The uniform fitting is tomorrow at 9. Your first shift is Friday. Can you do that?" Relief washed over me so hard, my knees felt weak. I could only nod, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Yes," I finally managed. "Thank you. Oh, thank you." I had a chance. It was a slim one, a terrifying one, but it was a chance. Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description. Friday came faster than I could have imagined. The crisp black uniform felt foreign on my body, stiff and unfamiliar. Chauvin was patient, showing me how to use the computer screen to place orders, how to balance 3 plates on one arm, a skill I wasn't sure my old bones could master. My first few tables were a blur of polite smiles and frantic trips to the kitchen. My feet were already starting to ache, but I ignored them. I focused on the faces, on getting the orders right, on keeping my hands from shaking as I poured water into delicate glasses. Then, a hush fell over the bustling dining room. The shift in energy was so sudden, it was like the air pressure had dropped. I saw Chauvin straighten up near the entrance, her professional smile looking a little tight. A group of men in dark suits walked in, but they all parted around the man in the center. He wasn't the biggest, but he had an air about him that took up all the space in the room. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped just a little, and his eyes, a pale, stormy gray, scanned the room with a deep sadness that felt ancient. "Who is that?" I whispered to a young waiter clearing a table next to me. He glanced over, his eyes wide. "You don't know? That's the big boss, the man himself, Smith Williams. He owns everything." "The whole tower. He never comes down here." The name hit me like a physical blow. Smith. It couldn't be. It was just a name, a coincidence. My Smithy was a little boy with blonde hair and scraped knees, a little boy I had loved like my own son, a boy I was forced to leave without a word, without a goodbye. My heart began to pound, a sick, heavy rhythm. I turned away, trying to focus on polishing silverware, my back to him, praying he wouldn't look my way. "Don't see me. Please, just don't see me." But it was like my fear was a magnet pulling his gaze across the crowded room. I felt it before I saw it, a prickling on the back of my neck. I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was walking the floor, his entourage trailing behind him like a shadow. He was closer now. His eyes, no longer scanning the room, were fixed on me. Time seemed to slow down. His confident stride faltered. He stopped dead in the middle of the restaurant. The men with him looked confused. I saw his face change. The tired sadness was gone, replaced by a storm of disbelief, of confusion, of a pain so raw and deep it stole the breath from my own lungs. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His fair skin went impossibly pale, a stark white against the dark decor of the room. He raised a trembling hand, pointing directly at me. And then his eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed. The thud of his body hitting the expensive carpet echoed in the sudden dead silence. Chaos erupted. People screamed, chairs scraped against the floor. His men rushed to his side. Shaban was shouting into her phone. Through it all, I just stood there, frozen, a serving tray of empty glasses clutched in my hands. What just happened? Why had he looked at me like he'd seen a ghost? Paramedics swarmed in, surrounding the fallen man. I was just a statue in the middle of the storm, my mind a blank wall of static. Then Shaban was in front of me, her green eyes wide with shock and a dawning, terrifying understanding. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "Beatrice," she said, her voice a strained whisper over the panicked noise. "When he fell, he was looking right at you. He said a name." I stared at her, unable to process anything. My world had tilted on its axis. "He said your name," she repeated, her voice trembling. "He kept saying, 'B, B.'" My mind was a roaring emptiness. B. A name I hadn't heard in almost 50 years. It was the name a little boy had given me because he couldn't say my full name. My Smithy. Shaban's grip on my arm was the only thing keeping me upright as she pulled me away from the chaos, her heels clicking urgently on the marble floor. She led me through a swinging door into the quiet, metallic world of the kitchen. The sounds of the dining room were muffled here, but the panic still hung in the air like the smell of burnt food. She pushed me gently onto a stool in a small, windowless office just off the main kitchen floor. The room smelled of bleach and old papers. "Just sit here for a minute, Beatrice," she said, her own face pale, her freckles standing out like tiny specks of dust. "I need to handle this. Just don't go anywhere." She looked at me, her green eyes searching my face for an answer I didn't know how to give. Was that suspicion in her eyes, or just fear? She left, closing the door softly behind her, and I was alone with the ghosts that had just been raised. My hands trembled so badly I had to clench them in my lap. I closed my eyes, and I wasn't in a cold office anymore. I was in a sunlit garden, the smell of roses thick in the air. A little boy with hair like spun gold was running toward me, his small legs pumping hard. He tripped on a root and went down, his laughter turning into a startled cry. I was there in a second, lifting him up, brushing the dirt from his scraped knee. "It's okay, Smithy," I'd whispered, rocking him gently. "Bee is here. Bee's got you." He had buried his tear-streaked face in my neck, his little arms wrapped tight around me. He always called me Bee, only him. The memory was so clear, so real, it was a physical ache in my chest, a deep, hollow ache for a life that had been stolen from me. The door opened, jolting me back to the present. It wasn't Shaban. A man stood there, tall and thin, in a suit so perfectly pressed he looked like he was cut from stone. His hair was gray at the temples, and his eyes were like chips of ice. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. Power rolled off him like a cold fog. He shut the door behind him, the click echoing in the small space. Shaban stood just behind him, looking small and worried. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Beatrice Williams," the man said. It wasn't a question. His voice was low and sharp. "I am Mr. Davies, legal counsel for the Williams Corporation. I have some questions for you." I just stared at him, my throat too tight. "You were hired 2 days ago?" he continued, glancing at a file he was holding. "No recent work experience. 68 years old. And on your very first shift, the CEO of this company, a man who has not had a public health incident in his life, collapses right after looking at you." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "That's quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say?" My heart pounded. He was accusing me. He thought I had done something. I don't know what you mean," I stammered. "Don't you?" he said, taking a step closer. The air grew colder. "What is your connection to Mr. Williams?" "I don't have one," I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My whole body screamed at me to tell the truth, but a deeper, older fear kept me silent. A fear of a powerful man who could ruin lives with a single word. I had seen it happen before. Mr. Davies let out a short, humorless laugh. "He said your name, Mrs. Williams, or a version of it. B. An interesting nickname. Is that what your friends call you when you're planning how to get money from a billionaire?" The cruelty of his words struck me silent. I looked past him, to Shaban, my one small anchor in this storm. I needed to see that kindness in her eyes again, that flash of understanding. But her gaze was fixed on the floor. She wrung her hands, a flush creeping up her neck. In her silence, I felt the ground give way beneath me. She doubted me. Of course she did. I was just some old woman, a nobody, and he was the most powerful man she had ever met. The feeling of being utterly alone, a feeling I knew so well, settled back over me like a heavy shroud. "I think you should leave," Mr. Davies said, his voice final. "We'll mail you your last check. We'll even be generous. Consider it a thank you for your very brief service, and a reminder to remain silent about this unfortunate event." He was firing me, dismissing me, erasing me, just like his father had done. The injustice of it, the raw, painful repetition of history, sparked something in me. "No," I said, my voice shaking but clear. I stood up from the stool, my old knees protesting. I was still shorter than him, but I met his icy gaze. "I won't." Before he could respond, the door flew open again. A young paramedic stood there, out of breath. "Mr. Davies, sir. He's awake, and he's asking for someone." Mr. Davies turned, his annoyance clear. "The doctor's, his personal physician is on the way." "No, sir," the paramedic said, looking past the lawyer, his eyes landing on me. "He's asking for her. He won't calm down. He just keeps asking to see the waitress." The world stopped. Mr. Davies stared at me, his cold confidence faltering for the first time. The air crackled with a new tension. He couldn't refuse. He couldn't risk upsetting his boss further. Without a word, he gestured curtly for me to follow. I walked past Shaban, whose face was a mixture of guilt and confusion. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. They had moved him into the restaurant's largest private dining room. He was lying on a long velvet couch, an oxygen mask beside him, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. The paramedic stood by, but his eyes, those same stormy gray eyes I remembered, were fixed on the door, waiting. When he saw me, a look of profound relief washed over his pale face. He looked so vulnerable, so much like the little boy from my memory, that it hurt to breathe. "Leave us," he said, his voice weak but firm. Mr. Davies started to protest. "Sir, I don't think that's wise." "Now," Smith commanded, his gaze never leaving mine. The lawyer and the paramedics hesitated, then filed out, closing the heavy doors behind them. We were alone. The silence in the opulent room was deafening. I stood by the door, my hands clasped in front of me, not knowing what to do, what to say after a lifetime of silence. He slowly sat up, his movements careful. "B," he whispered, the name a fragile thing. "It's really you, isn't it?" I could only nod, a lump forming in my throat. Tears welled in his eyes, the eyes of a powerful man who owned the world but looked like a lost child. He asked, his voice breaking, "Why? Why did you leave me? Dad said, he said you didn't want us anymore. He said you just left." The lie. The same cruel lie that had haunted my every waking moment for 50 years. The lie that had branded me as someone who could abandon a child I loved more than life itself. All the fear I had of his family, of their power, it all melted away in the face of his pain. He deserved the truth. He had always deserved it. I took a shaky step towards him. "Oh, Smithy," I said, the old name slipping out soft as a prayer. "That wasn't true. I never, ever wanted to leave you." His brow furrowed in confusion. "Then why did you? Where did you go?" I looked into his eyes, the eyes of the boy I had raised, and I gave him the only piece of the truth I could. "I didn't go, honey," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I was sent away." His face was a mask of confusion, a deep line forming between his brows. Sent away? By who? By my father? The idea seemed impossible to him, a story from another world. The man he knew, the powerful Arthur Williams, had been his hero, a giant who built an empire from nothing, a man who, Smith believed, had been abandoned just as he was. I took another step, my worn shoes sinking into the thick carpet. Your father, he was a very proud man, Smithy. He loved you more than anything, but he was also afraid. I found a chair and sank into it, my legs finally giving up. My gaze drifted to a painting on the wall, a dark, stormy sea. That's what it felt like all those years ago. I was in a small boat, and his father was the storm. I brought my eyes back to his. Do you remember your mother, Eleanor? He flinched, as if I'd touched a raw nerve. Of course. She was sick for a long time. She passed away a year after you were gone. The careful, rehearsed words of a boy who had been told a story so many times it became his truth. My heart ached for him. She wasn't sick, honey. She was sad. There's a difference. The memory came rushing back, clear and sharp. The scent of rain on the window panes of the old house, the quiet tears of his mother in the library. The day I left, I began, my voice barely a whisper. Your mother told me she was leaving. She was going to take you with her. She had a bag packed. She couldn't bear the loneliness anymore, the coldness of that house. She just wanted to be free, with you. Smith stared at me, his face pale. He was shaking his head slowly, a silent denial. Your father heard her, I continued, the truth a heavy weight I had carried for 50 years. He found us talking in the kitchen. I have never seen a man so angry, but it was a cold anger, Smithy, quiet and terrifying. He told her she would never take his son, that she would never tarnish the Williams name. I could see the scene in my mind. Arthur Williams, his eyes like ice chips, his voice a low threat that promised absolute ruin. He turned that icy gaze on me. He looked at me and said I had filled her head with foolish ideas. He said I was a poison in his house. He fired me on the spot. He had a man escort me to my room to pack a small bag, as if I were a criminal. Smith's hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists on his lap. He told me you stole from my mother, a pearl necklace. The cruelty of it stole my breath. It wasn't enough to banish me. He had to poison the memory of me too. No, honey. He gave me money, a lot of it. He pushed an envelope into my hand and said it was for my silence. He told me if I ever tried to contact you, if I ever told anyone what happened that day, he would destroy my husband, Robert. He said he would make sure Robert never work again, that we would end up on the street. And I believed him. He had the power to do it. The whole story was out, laid bare in the quiet, luxurious room. It was the secret that had hollowed out my life, the reason for the constant low-level fear I'd lived with for decades, the reason I flinched whenever I saw the Williams name in the news. Smith didn't speak. He just stared into the space between us, his world collapsing in on itself. The hero father, the tragic mother, the disloyal nanny, all of it was a lie, a carefully built cage to keep him trapped. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, then another. He didn't wipe them away. The great Smith Williams, the billionaire titan, was weeping for the little boy who'd had everything taken from him and hadn't even known it. My mother, he choked out. She died of a broken heart, the doctor said. He told everyone she was too fragile for this world. He built a wing of a hospital in her name. His laugh was a broken, bitter sound. Suddenly, the heavy doors creaked open. We both looked up, startled. Soban stood there, her hand on the brass handle, her face white with fear. She wasn't looking at Smith. She was looking at me. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But Mr. Davies, he's on the phone with the board. I heard him. He's telling them you had a psychotic break due to stress, Mr. Williams. He said a woman from your past appeared and triggered it. He's trying to get them to approve a temporary leave of absence for you, Mr. Williams, and he's drawing up a legal document for Beatrice, a gag order with a payment. He called it a containment strategy. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. It was happening again. The powerful man in the suit was trying to erase me, to buy my silence and throw me away. But this time was different. This time, Smithy knew the truth. Smith looked from Soban to me, and in his eyes, the grief was burning away, replaced by a cold, hard fire I recognized. It was his father's fire, but I prayed it would be used for good. He stood up, his body no longer looking weak. He seemed to grow taller, filling the room with the same power his father once had. He walked over to me, his stormy eyes locking with mine. "He will not do to you what my father did," he said, his voice low and intense. "This stops now. I am not him." He held out a hand to me. "I know I have no right to ask for anything, Bea, but I'm asking you to trust me. Don't sign anything. Don't talk to anyone but me. Can you do that?" After a lifetime of being silent, of being afraid, something inside me broke free. I put my trembling hand in his. His grip was firm and warm. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I can do that." He gave my hand a gentle squeeze, a promise passing between us. Then he turned to Shaban, who was still standing by the door like a frightened deer. "Shaban," he said, his tone shifting, becoming the CEO again. "Thank you. You took a great risk coming here." She swallowed hard and nodded. Beatrice, she has honest eyes. I knew that lawyer was wrong about her." A small smile touched Smith's lips. "He is. I'm going to need someone on the inside, someone I can trust, someone who isn't on my father's old payroll. Can I count on you?" Shaban's shoulders straightened. The fear in her eyes was replaced with determination. "Yes, sir, you can." "Good," he said. He looked back at me, the fire in his eyes softening, just a little. "We're going to fix this, all of it." He glanced down at my simple, worn uniform, at the hands roughened by a lifetime of work. "First, we are going to save your home. That is not even a question." He paused, his jaw tight. "And then, we are going to get you your life back. We are going to make sure the whole world knows the truth about Beatrice Williams." The drive was silent. I sat in the back of Smith's car, the leather seat so soft it felt like I was sinking. The city lights smeared past the tinted windows, a world away from the quiet streets of my neighborhood. Smith sat in the front, next to a driver with a stone face, and Shaban sat beside me. She kept looking over at me, her green eyes full of worry, but she didn't speak. I didn't know what to say either. My mind was a whirlwind of the past and the terrifying present. I clutched my purse on my lap, my knuckles white. The little stone Robert had given me was in my pocket, but for the first time in years, it felt cold and small, not big enough to anchor me. We didn't go to a tall, fancy building. Instead, the car wound its way through tree-lined roads until it stopped before a large gate. It swung open without a sound, and we drove up a long driveway to a house made of dark stone and glass. It was beautiful, I supposed, but it looked more like a museum than a home. It was silent and dark, and it felt like no one had ever laughed inside its walls. This was where my Smithy had grown up. The thought was a sharp pain in my chest. Inside, the house was just as quiet and cold. The ceilings were high, and our footsteps echoed on the polished floors. Smith seemed to notice my discomfort. "I know it's not much," he said, his voice sounding hollow in the big space. "But you'll be safe here. No one can get to you." He showed me to a guest room that was bigger than my entire living room. The bed was perfectly made, and a single perfect white flower sat in a vase on the nightstand. It was all very lovely, and it made me feel more alone than ever. The next day felt like a dream. Smith brought me breakfast himself on a tray, telling me to rest. He spent hours on the phone, his voice a low, urgent murmur from his office down the hall. I could hear the fight in his tone, the sharp edge of command. He was battling for me, for us. Late in the afternoon, he came to my room, a tired but triumphant look on his face. "It's done," he said, a real smile finally reaching his eyes. "I paid off the mortgage. The house is yours, Bea, free and clear. They can't touch it." The breath I had been holding for months, for years, rushed out of me in a sob. I covered my face with my hands, the relief so powerful it made me weak. My home, Robert's home. It was safe. "Oh, Smithy," I cried. "Thank you, thank you." He put a hesitant hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was both comforting and awkward. We were still strangers in so many ways. For a moment, I thought it was over. I thought the worst had passed. I could go home, and this whole nightmare would be a strange, sad memory. Siobhan came that evening. She let herself in with a key Smith had given her, her face pale but determined. She carried a cardboard box. "I went by your house," she said softly, handing it to me. "I thought you might want a few things." Inside were my worn Bible, a framed picture of Robert and me on our wedding day, and the old quilt from the foot of my bed. I hugged the quilt to my chest, the familiar scent of home filling my senses. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in a long time. She and Smith stood in the kitchen, talking in low voices, while I sat in the living area, the quilt wrapped around my shoulders. I watched them from a distance. He leaned against the counter, and she stood close, showing him something on her phone. They looked like they belonged together, a team. I saw the way he looked at her, a softness in his eyes that wasn't there before. And I saw the way she looked back, her fear for him mixed with a deep admiration. It was a language I didn't speak, a world I didn't belong to. I was just the ghost that had brought them together. "There's a problem," Siobhan said, her voice a little louder now. I straightened up. "It's Davies. He's not backing down. He's telling the board that you're emotionally unstable, that your judgment is compromised. He's using your collapse against you." "Let him try," Smith said, his voice hard as iron. "The truth is on our side." "That's the thing," Siobhan said, and I could hear the fear in her voice now. "He's not fighting with the truth. He's fighting dirty. He's been digging, not into your life, but into hers." She glanced over at me. He had a team of private investigators looking into Beatrice's finances, her whole life. A cold knot formed in my stomach. What could they possibly find? Robert and I had lived a simple, honest life. We had nothing to hide. "He found out how your father set up the trust for your mother's hospital wing," Siobhan said, her words coming faster. "And he found something else inside the corporate archives, a hidden account, a contingency fund." Smith frowned. "What for?" Siobhan took a deep breath, her eyes locking with mine across the vast, sterile room. "It was a trap, Beatrice. Your foreclosure. It wasn't just bad luck." The room started to spin. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "The bank that held your mortgage," she explained, her voice trembling with anger. "It was bought by a shell corporation 10 years ago, a corporation owned by Williams Industries. It was your father's doing, Smith. He bought her debt. He's been the one holding her mortgage all this time." The air left my lungs. I felt like I was falling from a great height. My husband's illness,
the medical bills that piled up, every desperate month we struggled to make the payment. It wasn't a fight against a nameless bank. It was a fight against Arthur Williams, a dead man's ghost reaching out from the grave to control me. He hadn't just threatened me with ruin, he had built the path to it brick by brick and had been waiting for me to fall. The money he had given me for my silence all those years ago wasn't a payoff, it was bait. Smith stared at Shoban, his face a mask of horror. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking just as he had before he collapsed. "He owned her," he whispered, the words full of self-loathing. "My father owned her entire life." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a fresh, terrible grief. This was a new layer of his father's cruelty, more monstrous than he could have imagined. His father hadn't just lied to him, he had enslaved the woman who raised him. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt before me, taking my trembling hands in his. "Bea, I am so sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "This is a rot that goes deeper than I ever knew." The cold dread in my heart was slowly being replaced by a fire I hadn't felt in 50 years. It was the fire of pure injustice. I looked at this man, this boy I had loved, whose life had been built on a foundation of poison and lies. I looked at the brave young woman who was risking everything to help us. And I knew that being silent was no longer an option. It never really had been. "It's not your fault, Smithy," I said, my voice stronger than I thought possible. I squeezed his hands. He looked up, his stormy gray eyes meeting mine. The grief was still there, but underneath it, a new resolve was hardening like steel. "He made a monster of my legacy," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I will burn it to the ground before I let it hurt anyone else, before it hurts you." He stood up, no longer a grieving son, but a king ready to go to war for his kingdom. "Davies thinks he's protecting a company. We're going to show him he's defending a crime scene." The days that followed were a strange dream of quiet purpose. Smith worked like a man possessed, his office a fortress of ringing forms and low, intense conversations. Shoban was his shadow, a blur of efficiency and quiet strength, bringing him files, cups of coffee, and her unwavering belief. I saw how he looked at her when he thought no one was watching, his gaze lingering on the fiery determination in her eyes. It was a look of a drowning man finding a piece of solid ground. And I was happy for him. He deserved a light in his life after so much darkness. For me, he was gentle. He would find me in the vast, quiet living room and sit with me, not saying much.
One afternoon, he brought me a small bowl of strawberries, just like I used to do for him when he was a boy. "Do you remember," he said, his voice soft, "you used to tell me they were monsters' hearts, and I had to be brave to eat them." A real, true laugh escaped me, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. "You were a very brave boy, Smithy." "I had you," he said, and the simple words were a balm on 50 years of wounds. In that moment, sitting in his cold, empty house, I felt a flicker of the life that had been stolen. We weren't a boss and a waitress. We were just Bea and Smithy again, and we were going to fight the ghosts together. The foreclosure notice, the fear, the shame of asking for a job, it all felt a million miles away. My home was safe. My boy was back. For the first time, I let myself believe everything would be okay. The storm broke on a Tuesday. It was raining outside, the water streaking down the huge glass walls of the house, making it feel like we were underwater. I was in the kitchen, making a pot of tea, when Smith came in. He didn't look at me. Shoban was behind him, her face ashen, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. In Smith's hand was a thin, worn leather book, an old ledger. He placed it on the marble island between us. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of the rain. "Mr. Davies sent this over," he said, his voice flat, dead. All the warmth from the day before was gone. He found it in my father's private safe. I guess it's part of his containment strategy. He slid the book towards me. He said I should ask you what it is. I looked down. It was a record of payments. My name was at the top of the page. Underneath it, in neat, precise columns, were dates and amounts. It started 50 years ago with a large sum, and then it continued, month after month, year after year. The payments were small at first, then they grew. They never stopped. Not until a year ago, right after Smith took full control of the company assets. My blood ran cold. I couldn't breathe. The kitchen, with its clean lines and expensive appliances, began to feel like a cage. "I don't understand," Smith said, but he did. I could see the understanding dawning in his eyes, a terrible, world-ending light. "My father, he paid you to stay away. That's what you said. He threatened you." "He did," I whispered, my voice a dry rustle of leaves. "This isn't a one-time payment, Bia," he said, and the name Bia was a weapon now, sharp and cruel. "This is a salary for 50 years. It paid for your life. It paid for your house." He looked at me, his face a mask of stone, but his eyes were screaming. "The house my father owned, the house he let you live in, as long as the checks kept coming and you stayed away from his son." The truth was a sickness in my stomach, a shame so deep it felt like it would split me in two. I had buried it for so long, pretended it wasn't real. I had told myself a story for 50 years, a story where I was only a victim. "Robert," I stammered, my husband's name tasting like a lie. "He was so scared. Your father, you don't know what he was like. He promised us ruin. Robert said we had no choice. He said we should take the money, just for a little while, until we were on our feet." "A little while?" Smith's voice was a low growl. "A lifetime, you mean." He saw it all now. My husband, Robert, the man I had painted as my rock, my partner in a life of honest hardship, was a man who had taken a bribe. And I, his wife, had let him. I had lived in a home bought with my silence. The money wasn't just a threat, it was a transaction. I hadn't just been sent away, I had been sold. And I had been so busy feeling sorry for myself, for the life I lost, that I had never truly faced the one I had chosen. "You let me believe he was a monster," Smith said, his voice breaking with a fresh, more horrible wave of pain. "And he was. But you weren't the saint in the story, were you? You were on his payroll. All this time, you were just another one of his secrets." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure anguish. "I destroyed my father's memory for you. I was ready to burn down his entire legacy. For what? A lie?" I looked past him, my eyes pleading with Shoban. She had honest eyes, he had said. I needed to see that honesty now. I needed her to see me. But she wouldn't meet my gaze. She was looking at the ledger, at the cold, hard proof of my deceit. She worked for him. She was loyal to him. And I had made him look like a fool. In her eyes, I wasn't an old woman who needed saving. I was a fraud. "I loved you," I cried. the words torn from the deepest part of me. "Stop calling me that," he roared, and the force of it made me flinch back. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was his father's son, full of the same cold fire, the same power to ruin. He looked at me with disgust. Was this whole thing a plan? Show up at my restaurant, looking poor and helpless? Make me see you? Make me collapse? Was it all just to get the money turned back on? No. The accusation was so vile, so far from the truth, it stole the air from my lungs. But what did the truth matter now? I had lied by leaving things out, and a partial truth is a whole lie. He turned his back on me, a gesture of finality that broke the last piece of my heart. "Shobin," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "please show Mrs. Williams to her room. She'll stay there. I need to think." He walked out of the kitchen without another look. Mrs. Williams. He had stripped me of my name, of my place in his life. I was a stranger again. Worse than a stranger. I was a traitor. Shoban came towards me, her face a careful, blank mask. There was no kindness left in her eyes, only a weary professionalism. "Come on, Beatrice," she said, her voice quiet. She didn't touch me. She walked ahead of me, leading me through the silent, echoing house like a guard leading a prisoner. She left me at the door to the guest room, the beautiful, perfect room that was now my cell. I walked in and sank onto the edge of the bed. The quilt she had brought me from my house was still there, folded neatly. I touched it. It didn't smell like home anymore. It smelled like my failure. The home wasn't mine. It was his. Everything was his. I was 68 years old, and I had nothing. My husband's memory was tainted, my integrity was gone, and the boy I had come to save now looked at me with nothing but hate. I was utterly, completely alone. The silence of the big house pressed in on me, and I finally understood. Arthur Williams had won. From the grave, he had finally, perfectly destroyed me. For 2 days, I existed in that room. The world outside was a silent movie of gray rain against the glass. Twice a day, a tray of food would appear outside my door, placed there by a maid who never knocked and whom I never saw. I didn't eat. The food just sat there, growing cold, a perfect picture of a life I couldn't touch. The silence was the worst part. It was a living thing, pressing in on me, whispering all the truths I had spent a lifetime hiding from. The ledger book wasn't on the kitchen island anymore. It was in my mind, its neat columns of numbers, a testament to my long, slow surrender. Robert hadn't been a bad man. He was a scared man. I saw his face in the dark, the night Arthur Williams's man delivered the first envelope of cash. "It's a gift, Bea," Robert had said, his hands shaking as he counted the bills. "He wronged you. This is him making it right." But we both knew it wasn't a gift. It was a leash. Every month, the money came, and with it, the quiet shame that we used to build our life. We paid our bills, we bought our groceries, we fixed our roof. And with every dollar, the leash got shorter, pulling me farther and farther away from the boy I loved. I told myself I was doing it for Robert, for our marriage, for a roof over our heads. But that was just another story. The truth was, I was a coward. I had traded my smithy for a life of quiet comfort, and now the bill had come due. On the third morning, the rain stopped. The sun came out, weak and watery, making the wet trees glitter. It felt like a cruel joke, this little moment of peace. A soft knock came at the door. It wasn't the maid. It was Shoban. She stood there in a simple, dark dress, a thick folder in her hands. The kindness was gone from her face, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. She looked older than she had a few days ago. "Beatrice," she said, her voice low and formal, "Mr. Williams has asked me to bring you these." She stepped into the room and placed the folder on the small desk by the window. She didn't look at me. She looked at the picture of Robert and me on the nightstand, the one she had so kindly brought from my home. Her jaw tightened for a moment. "He wants you to read them over. He'll be in to speak with you in an hour." "What is it?" I asked, my own voice a stranger's whisper. She finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart. It was pity. The kind of pity you give to something that is already lost. "It's a solution," she said. "A way for everyone to move forward." She hesitated, her professional mask cracking for just a second. "He's in an impossible position, Beatrice. The board, Mr. Davies, they're trying to take the company from him. They're saying this whole situation proves he's not fit to lead. He's just trying to protect what his father built." "His father built it on lies," I said, the words bitter in my mouth. "Maybe," she replied, her voice barely audible, "but it's all he has left." She turned and left, closing the door softly behind her, leaving me alone with the folder. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't one document, it was a stack of them, full of legal words I barely understood. But I understood the story they told. It was a statement, an official affidavit, written for me to sign. It said that I had been a beloved nanny to the Williams family. It said that after my employment ended, Arthur Williams, out of the goodness of his heart, had set up a private fund to ensure my well-being for the rest of my life. It painted him as a secret saint, a generous man who looked after his loyal staff. It said my recent financial troubles were a misunderstanding and that my showing up at the restaurant was a coincidence. It said my brief emotional reunion with his son was just that, a confused moment between an old woman and a grieving man. It was a neat, clean story, a lie that would save his company, but would bury my truth forever. The door opened an hour later. Smith walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His face was pale and drawn, and the fire in his eyes had burned down to cold, gray ash. He didn't look at me, but at the papers on the desk. "Have you read it?" he asked. His voice was empty. "I have," I said, standing up to face him. I was just an old woman in a borrowed room, but I would not cower. "It's a generous offer," he said, the words sounding rehearsed. "You sign it, and the house is yours, no strings attached. A new trust will be set up for you. You'll never have to worry about money again for the rest of your life. All you have to do is agree to the story, the official story." "The lie," I corrected him softly. He flinched. "The narrative," he bit back. "The one that keeps this company from falling apart. The one that keeps my father's name from being dragged through the mud any more than it already has been." "And what about my name?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What about the truth of what he did to me, to your mother, to you?" For the first time, he looked at me, and his eyes were full of a terrible, cold grief. "The truth?" he said, his voice dangerously low. "The truth is, you took my father's money for 50 years, Beatrice. The truth is, you let me grow up believing a lie while you lived comfortably on it. The truth is, you are as much a part of this cage as he was. This document," he gestured to the papers, "just makes the cage official." His words were stones, each one hitting me, bruising me. He was right. I was part of it. I had been a willing prisoner. "And if I don't sign?" I whispered, dreading the answer. He walked to the window and stared out at the glittering trees. "If you don't sign," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Then I will have no choice." Mr. Davies has already prepared the counter-strategy. We will release the ledger ourselves. We will frame it as a 50-year campaign of extortion against my father by you and your husband. We will take back the house as it was purchased with company assets. We will sue you for every cent you ever took. I will use the full weight of this corporation to crush you. I will destroy your name, your husband's memory, and leave you with absolutely nothing. I will do it, B. Don't think for a second that I won't. The threat was absolute. It was his father's voice coming from his mouth. He had given me a choice between two kinds of death. I could die with a roof over my head, but with a lie in my soul, or I could die with my truth, but with nothing else, on the street. He had learned his father's lessons well. He was protecting his legacy, his empire, just as Arthur had. I looked at his back, at the rigid line of his shoulders. "What happened to the boy who wanted to burn it all down?" I asked, tears finally streaming down my face. He turned, and his face was a mask of pure agony. "He died," he said. "He died in that kitchen when he realized his hero and his savior were the same liar." He picked up a pen from the desk and set it on top of the papers. "You have until tonight. Shaban will come for your answer." He walked to the door, his hand resting on the handle. He paused, his back still to me. "For what it's worth," he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. "I'm sorry it has to be this way." Then he was gone. I was alone again, with the silent papers and the single black pen. My whole life had come down to this, a signature. I could sign the lie and live, or hold on to the truth and be destroyed. I sank into the chair, the silence of the big house swallowing me whole. I looked at the pen. It was heavy in my hand, heavy with the weight of 50 years, heavy with the choice between my life and my soul. I sat in the deepening twilight, the papers a pale rectangle on the desk in front of me. The pen lay beside them like a sleeping snake. My hand ached to pick it up, to sign my name, to end this nightmare. It would be so easy. A few strokes of ink, and my little house would be safe. Robert's garden, the worn spot on the floor by his favorite chair, the chipped teacup we shared for 40 years, all of it would remain mine. All I had to do is kill the truth. All I had to do was agree that Arthur Williams was a good man. The memory of Robert's face, pale with fear all those years ago, rose in my mind. "We have no choice, Bea," he'd whispered, his hands trembling as he held that first envelope of money. "He's too powerful. This is the only way we survive." I had believed him. I wanted to believe him. It was easier to think of it as survival than to call it what it was, a price. I let his fear become my excuse. We built our quiet life on a foundation of that money, and with every dollar we spent, another stone was laid on the tomb of my integrity. I had told Smithy his father sent me away, but the deeper truth was that I had let myself be bought. I had stayed away for a price, and in doing so, I had become a part of the lie that shaped his entire life. The monster wasn't just his father. It was the whole cage of secrets we had all built around him. A cold certainty settled in my heart. If I signed that paper, I would be doing it all over again. I would be taking the money, accepting the cage, not just for me this time, but for him. I would be teaching him the same lesson his father taught me, that truth has a price, and that power gives you the right to buy it. I looked at the man he had become in the past few days, the coldness in his eyes, the brutal threat in his voice. That was his father's ghost staring out at me. Signing that paper wouldn't save me. It would kill what was left of the little boy I loved. It would prove to him that everything, even a person's soul, could be bought and sold. It would make him his father's son forever. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach at the thought of the street, of having nothing, of my age and my tired bones. But for the first time in 50 years, another feeling was stronger. It was love. Not a soft, quiet love, but a fierce, burning thing. The love of a mother for her child, a love that would walk through fire. I had failed him once by choosing comfort over courage. I would not fail him again. I would rather be destroyed by the truth than live another day in a comfortable lie. I finally understood. The choice wasn't about saving my house. It was about saving his soul. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady now. I turned to the last page of the document, the one with the single, empty line waiting for my name. But I didn't sign it. Instead, I turned the page over to the clean, white back. With slow, careful letters, I wrote just 3 words. I remember you. Then I put the pen down. My decision was made. I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me, the first I had felt since I walked into that tower. I had nothing left to lose, which meant I was finally free. I walked over to the bed and picked up the picture of Robert and me. I looked at his smiling face. "I'm sorry, my love," I whispered, "but I have to be brave now." When Shaban knocked on the door that night, I was ready. I opened it before she could knock a second time. She stood there, looking pale and tense, her eyes full of a sad duty. She held a black folder, ready to take the signed papers from me. "It's time, Beatrice," she said softly. "I know," I replied, my voice calm. I walked back to the desk and picked up the stack of papers. I held them out to her. She looked from the papers to my face, searching. "Did you sign it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "No," I said. "I couldn't." Relief and terror warred in her eyes. "Beatrice, do you know what this means? He'll do it. I know him. He'll do what he said." "Yes," I said, and my voice didn't tremble. "He will do what he thinks his father would have done. He will try to destroy me to protect a legacy of lies. But that legacy is a poison, Shaban, and I will not help him drink it. I will not be the one who proves to him that love can be bought and silence can be sold." I flipped the last page over and showed her the words I had written. "I remember you." She stared at the message, her brow furrowed. "What does this mean?" "It means that before all this, before the money and the lies, there was something real," I said. "I was his Bia, and he was my Smithy. I remember the boy he was, not the man his father tried to turn him into. And I will hold on to that memory, even if it's the only thing I have left in this world." I handed her the papers. "Give this to him. Tell him I refuse his offer. Tell him I choose the truth, my truth, and his." She took the folder, her hands shaking slightly. She looked at me, really looked at me, and the pity was gone. In its place was a flicker of something I hadn't seen in days. Respect, maybe even admiration. She saw not a liar or a victim, but a woman who had finally found her strength. "He's not his father, Beatrice," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He's not. He's just lost." Then I pray he finds his way back, I said, even if it costs me everything. She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. She clutched the folder to her chest like a shield. "I'll tell him," she said, her voice firm now, filled with a new purpose. She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the long, silent hall, carrying my decision, my freedom, my ruin. I closed the door and leaned against it, the polished wood cool against my back. The fight was over. I had lost my home, my security, my future. But as the silence of the great, empty house settled around me, I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. I had faced the coward in my own heart, and I had won. Whatever happened next, I would face it as Beatrice Williams, a woman who remembered the truth. And for the first time in 50 years, that was enough. I heard the clock in the hall chime once, marking the hour. Any minute now, Shaban would return to collect the papers, and my fate would be sealed. I felt a strange calm, the kind that comes after a long fever breaks. I had made my peace. I sat on the edge of the perfectly made bed, my hands folded in my lap, and I waited for the end. The door opened, but it wasn't Shaban. It was Smith. He stood in the doorway, the folder in his hand, my refusal on top. He looked different. The cold anger was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out exhaustion, as if he had been wrestling with something and lost. He walked into the room and stopped in the middle, the space between us filled with the ghosts of 50 years. His eyes fell on the 3 words I had written. "I remember you," he read aloud, his voice rough and quiet. He looked up at me, his face a mask of confusion and pain. "What do you remember, Bia?" The name, my name, was soft again, not a weapon. It was a question, a plea, and I gave him the truest thing I had left. "I remember a little boy with a fever," I said, my voice as soft as his. "You were 5 years old. You were so sick, the doctor was worried. Your father was in another country, and your mother was so frightened she couldn't even come into the room. For 3 days and 3 nights, I sat in a chair by your bed. I held a cool cloth to your forehead, and I sang you the little song about the river that runs to the sea. You wouldn't eat, you wouldn't sleep, but you would listen to me sing. You wouldn't let anyone else near you, only me." He stared at me, and I saw a flicker deep in his stormy eyes, a forgotten door creaking open. He remembered. The song, the cool cloth, the feeling of being safe when the world was a hot, scary blur. His father had told him I left when he was sick, that he had abandoned him at his weakest moment. Another lie, perhaps the cruelest of all, designed to erase any memory of my love. The harsh lines of his face seemed to melt, the CEO falling away, leaving only the heartbroken man underneath. He sank into the chair by the window, the fight gone out of him. He whispered, not to me, but to the room, to the ghosts. The door opened again. Shaban stood there, her face pale, but her eyes shining with a fierce, nervous energy. She clutched a different folder to her chest. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Williams, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I didn't just give you her note." Smith looked up, his expression blank with grief. Shaban took a steadying breath and stepped forward. "When Beatrice refused to sign your offer, when she chose to lose everything rather than tell a lie, it made me think, why was your father so afraid of her? Why build a 50-year cage of money and threats? It had to be more than just trying to hide that his wife wanted to leave him. It had to be something bigger." She walked to the desk and opened her folder, pulling out a thin document, its paper yellowed and fragile with age. I kept digging in the corporate archives, she said, her words coming faster. In the oldest, forgotten files. I found the original incorporation papers for Williams Industries, the very first draft. She laid the delicate paper on the desk. Look at the name. Smith rose and leaned over the desk. I moved to stand beside him, my eyes following his to the elegant, faded script at the top of the page. The name wasn't Williams Industries. It was Williams and Eleanor Consolidated. My breath caught in my throat. Your mother's family had money, Saban explained, her voice low and urgent. They weren't billionaires, but they were wealthy. The seed capital for the first factories, the money that started it all, it was hers. He convinced her to invest everything she had. This was supposed to be their company, a partnership. She then placed a second, crisper document beside the first. This is the final version, the one that was filed a year later. Her name is gone. The truth was a sudden, blinding light. Arthur had not just been a cold husband, he had been a thief. There's one more thing, Saban said, her hand shaking as she pulled a folded, sealed letter from the folder.
The wax seal was broken, but the envelope was addressed to Arthur Williams. In a looping, feminine hand I recognized instantly. It was tucked inside the first draft. It's from your mother. It's dated the day you were sent away, Beatrice. Smith picked up the letter as if it were a holy relic. He unfolded it, and his mother's words, silent for half a century, filled the room. He read them aloud, his voice cracking, breaking, but never stopping. She wasn't just leaving a lonely marriage. She was leaving a business partner who had systematically erased her, who had stolen her inheritance and her name from the very foundations of the empire they were meant to build together. She was going to file a lawsuit. She was going to expose him as a fraud. She was going to take her son and her fortune and start a new life. The puzzle of my life, the question that had haunted me for 50 years, was finally solved. Smith looked up from the letter, his face a ruin. He looked at me, his eyes seeing everything clearly for the first time. He didn't fire you because you filled her head with foolish ideas, he said, his voice raw with the revelation. He fired you because you were her only friend, her only witness. He couldn't let her leave, and he couldn't let you speak. He had to silence you both. The entire Williams legacy, the name on the tower, the empire he had spent his life protecting, was built on a crime, a theft against his own mother. The immense weight that had been crushing him, the terrible burden of his father's legacy, simply vanished. It was never real. It was a story told by a thief to his son. He was free. He crossed the room and took my hands in his. His were warm now. The cold ash in his eyes was gone, replaced by a fire that was all his own. You chose the truth, Bea, he said, his voice filled with a reverence that humbled me. Even when I was my father's son, even when I threatened you with his ghost, you didn't do it to save your house. You did it to save me from him. He squeezed my hands. Thank you. He stood tall, no longer a grieving son, but a man remade. He turned to Shaban, his voice ringing with a new and true authority. Shaban, cancel my appointments for the week, arrange a press conference for tomorrow morning, and get me a new legal team. I want the best, and I want them now. He looked at me, a small, sad, but hopeful smile on his face. We're going to tell the world the truth, all of it. He gestured toward the letter. The first order of business of Williams and Eleanor Consolidated will be to honor its co-founder. The joy, the relief, it was so powerful I felt my knees weaken. He put an arm around me, holding me steady. I'm so sorry, Bea, he whispered, for everything, for what he did to you, for what I almost became. The tears were in his eyes again, but they were tears of cleansing, like the rain that had finally stopped.
"Please," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Don't go. I need you. Not as a memory, not as a secret, as my family." I looked at my Smithy, his face alight with purpose. I looked at Shaban, who stood beside him, her loyalty and courage having helped bring us to this moment. This was my home now, not the building, but these people. The truth hadn't destroyed us. It had set us all free. "I'm not going anywhere, Smithy," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I'm right here." The next morning, the world felt too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. I stood before the mirror in my simple gray dress, the nicest one I owned. It wasn't a uniform, it was my own. I looked at the old woman staring back at me, at the lines on her face that told the story of a long, hard life. But today, for the first time, I saw strength in those lines, not just weariness. I was terrified, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, but I was not going to hide, not anymore. Smith came to my door. He was wearing a simple dark suit, but he didn't look like his father. His eyes, clear and steady, were his own. Shaban was with him, her hand resting on his arm, a silent anchor. She gave me a small, brave smile. "Are you ready, Beatrice?" she asked. I took a deep breath and nodded. "I am." We didn't go in the back way. We walked right through the main entrance of Williams Tower, past the hushed employees who stared at us with wide, curious eyes. The noise was a physical thing, a wave of murmurs and clicks that washed over me. For a moment, my courage faltered. I felt small again, just an old woman caught in a storm of powerful people. But then Smith reached back and took my hand. His grip was firm and warm, a silent promise. Shaban took my other hand. We walked up to the podium together, a strange new family, and faced the world. Smith didn't read from a paper. He spoke from his heart. He told them about his mother, Eleanor, not as a fragile saint, but as a brilliant, strong woman who had been the true architect of the company. He held up the letter she had written, his voice shaking as he spoke of her stolen legacy. Then he turned to me. The cameras all swung in my direction, their flashes like tiny explosions of light. "This is Beatrice Williams," he said, his voice ringing with pride. "For 50 years, she was a victim of my father's lies, a victim of his fear. She was the woman who raised me, who loved me, and who was forced into silence to protect a crime." He looked right at me, and his next words were not for the reporters, but for me. "Her silence is over, and so is my family's." He announced that the company would be renamed, effective immediately, to Williams and Eleanor Consolidated. A gasp rippled through the room. The lie that had stood for half a century had crumbled into dust in a matter of minutes. Afterward, in the sudden quiet of Smith's office, the three of us just stood there, breathing. The battle was over. A moment later, the door opened. Mr. Davies stood there, his face gray, his perfect suit looking like a costume he could no longer fill. He didn't look at Smith. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the cold, bitter light of defeat. "The board has accepted your terms," he said to Smith, his voice a dry rasp. Then he turned and walked away without another word, a ghost vanishing from a house he no longer haunted. That evening, I asked Shaban to drive me somewhere. We went to the small, quiet cemetery where Robert was buried. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of soft pink and orange. I placed a handful of wildflowers from my own garden on the cool stone of his headstone. I thought of the 50 years we had spent together, of his fear and my silence. I had been angry at him, angry that his fear had helped build our cage. But standing there, in the peaceful silence, the anger melted away, leaving only a quiet sadness. "You were scared, Robert," I whispered to the stone, "and I was too. We did the best we could." It wasn't a perfect love story, free of mistakes, but it was our story. I forgave him, and in doing so, I forgave myself. When we got back to the house, Smith was waiting on the porch. Shaban went and stood beside him, and he took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. It was a simple gesture, but it held a world of meaning. They belonged together. They had found each other in the ruins of his lies and were building something true. I watched them for a moment, my heart full. My boy had found his light. He looked over at me, a real, easy smile on his face. "There's a board meeting tomorrow morning," he said, "for the new company. I saved you a seat. We need a conscience, a true north." The offer was so unexpected, so kind, it took my breath away. He wasn't just giving me back my life, he was giving me a voice. 6 months later, I stood on the sidewalk across the street from the tower. The morning sun glinted off the glass and steel, but the name carved above the entrance was different. Williams and Eleanor Consolidated. It looked right. It looked true. I wasn't wearing a waitress uniform or an old dress. I wore a simple blue coat Shaban had helped me pick out, and I felt comfortable in my own skin. I wasn't here out of desperation. I was here for lunch with my family. I pushed open the heavy glass doors, the same doors I had pushed open with a trembling hand what felt like a lifetime ago. I saw my reflection in the polished glass. The woman staring back at me was still old, her hair was still gray, but her eyes were clear. She was standing tall. She was not a victim, not a ghost, not a secret. She was home. Smith and Shaban were waiting for me just inside, his arm around her shoulders. He smiled when he saw me, a smile that reached all the way to his stormy gray eyes. "Bia," he said, his voice warm with love. "You're here." What did this story teach you about truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.